Is this thing on? Hi guys, my name is Abby and this is the Just Flip It podcast. So this week I thought I'd change it up a bit. Rather than giving you or dropping 2 episodes every Sunday, I thought I'd combine it. We'll see how it goes. Give me some feedback if you're interested in hearing that or if you're not. The way that I'm going to do it is that I'm going to do the weekly roundup first, and I'm going to go to the second part of the podcast afterwards. Now we're going to move into the news part of this podcast. In the news this week, don't let your property become party central. The accidental landlord warns against swapping long-term lets or tenants for short-term ones. This article was done by, I want to say, E.S. Holmes and a lady called Victoria Whitlock, which details the issues that people have when they substitute long-term lets for short-term ones. Her article refers to or recounts a tale of a landlord from Belfast who let his property out for a night, as a result incurred £40,000 worth of damage. Yes, teens actually did this. It's just an article about the horrors. Don't do it. Some scaremongering, I would say. I think if you've done your due diligence properly and make sure you do things such as having a 2 or 3 night minimum stay, chances are you're going to reduce people booking it for one night and absolutely trashing it. Not to say that that can't happen, but it just reduces it. Even having it in your T's and C's and having a holding deposit can really, really help towards this. Whilst the article, in some sense, is factual, there are things that you can do to mitigate this. The next article that caught my eye was government to pay 200 million for safer cladding. This is in response to what's currently happening with Grenfell. The government said that they're going to cover the £200 million bill for redoing other cladding which is similar to Grenfell in approximately 150 blocks in and around the capital. I think originally they wanted either like housing associations or the councils to do this, and then in turn these people would pass it on to leaseholders, but government decided against it. And I think with local elections coming up, they don't want people to look at this, or they don't want this to be something that could cost them. So they've decided to fork out the costs of doing this cladding. The Grenfell disaster will always be one of the worst disasters that has happened in recent times. I mean, I remember when it happened 2 years ago, and I was speaking to a colleague of mine who said the amount that they put aside for that cladding was never going to be sufficient. And as a result, something as tragic as this happened. So the inquest or the inquiry into it is still ongoing, and we shall see what happens with this going forward. The final article that I saw was millennials wrongly rely on inherited money. Apparently, we think that when our family members, mums, dads, kick the bucket, we will get about £130,000, which you could put towards getting a new house, which unfortunately is not the case. On average, it's more like 11,000, which is what? Stamp duty on a small flat? Nothing. I found this quite funny because when expectations don't actually meet reality, people just need to face up to reality and just know that it's going to be tough to get on the housing ladder. Not to say it's impossible, but one shouldn't just rely on any inheritance they think they're likely to get. And that's it for this week in the news. Stay tuned for the next part of the pod. This week on the pod, I'm going to focus on low-level strategies that can generate an income. These are property strategies, that is, and allow you to eventually get rid of your job. So these are also called no money down strategies. And the two that I'm going to be focusing on this week and next week, well, the first one are HMOs and the second one, serviced apartments. And the way in which you can obtain these is primarily through rent-to-rent deals. So what do I mean by when I say rent-to-rent? So basically, you are renting a property from a landlord and then you let it out to a tenant. The contract that you will use between yourself and the landlord is known as a company let. So in effect, you'll be acting as an estate agent who will then let the property out to tenants. As I said, this is a really common strategy within the community, the property community. and it's something that could help you replace your income that you get from a job. So a few seconds ago, I mentioned HMO. So I think you just need to understand what the definition of that is. A HMO is a house of multiple occupation. And by this, I mean that if your property is let to 5 or more tenants from more than one household and is at least 3 stories high, they share a common toilet or bath facilities, it's then classed as a HMO. When managing these types of properties, you need to make sure that you have the correct permissions, either from the council or from the landlord's mortgage provider, if they have a mortgage. If they don't, and they own the deed or the title or the freehold, then you can bypass all these permissions, which is a good thing. But with any strategy that you use in property, there are pluses and minuses. So I spoke about a plus being, eventually, if you have enough of these, you could replace the income from your job, which is a really good thing. However, the downside is that these types of properties require a considerable amount of management and maintenance. So you should make sure you're aware of that. And if you don't like dealing with tenants or people, or if you don't like people generally, this really isn't the strategy for you. Heck, I'm just giving you the heads up. Also, with these types of properties, it may be that you will need a license. You need to go down to your council and speak to the local HMO officer to determine what is required in order to set up this type of property and run it as a HMO. I can't tell you how much it costs. I mean, I've seen some costs that say £140, and I've seen some costs that are like £1,500. So you actually need to do your due diligence, go down to the necessary public authorities and find out what you need in order to ensure that you're running the correct HMO business. Also, I've heard not horror stories, but instances whereby people have taken on these properties from landlords and it has been months before they get tenants who will gel with other tenants, because remember, they're going to be strangers all living in the same house. So you need to make sure that they all live together cohesively, like each other at least. And there have been instances where people haven't managed to do that. So the money that they thought that they were going to make per room, they actually haven't. So that's just something to bear in mind. But on the reverse, these are very, very lucrative strategies if you get it right. So big risk, big reward. Sorry, I just want to quickly mention when I classified what HMO was in terms of the stories and the households, it's not standard across every council or borough. So again, check with your council to determine. You can even just go onto their website just to determine what class house or constitutes as a HMO. I also want to do another disclaimer. You might hear me speak about obtaining these houses like it's a piece of cake, but it really isn't, trust me. And I think I'm going to actually do another either video on my Facebook or Instagram about agents and working with agents and some of the things I have encountered. So I say all that to say agents and landlords, just approaching them and asking to take on their house isn't a smooth sailing. Anyone who's making it out to be is lying to you. Like, seriously, they are lying. Please believe me. But like I said, if you are lucky enough or you've done your due diligence, you're prepared enough and you managed to obtain one, you should be ecstatic for that. So yeah, that's my summary on HMOs. If you want to know more, in addition to going onto the internet, you can also pick up a book called No Money Down Property Investing by Kevin McDonald. It's a really, really good book because it goes into much more detail about each of the property strategies without using your money or little of your money. If you have any questions, please email me on flipitpod@gmail.com, and please rate, review and subscribe to this podcast. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for the next episode.